Within our cycle, we have 4 different archetypes, each phase connected to the different archetypes of the cycle. And so our first archetype in our follicular phase is the maiden. So the maiden is what we start off with when we have our first bleed. We come into our maiden years, which is very like late childhood. So let's say around 14, 15, right? Then moving into our late 20s. And the maiden is all about the playfulness, the curiosity, the risking it, the courageousness, the allowing herself to trial and error things, to try different things on, seeing what works for her, what doesn't work for her. And then so all these qualities of the maiden comes up in the follicular phase of our cycle too. We move through that trial and error period in our early 20s. I don't know about you, but my early 20s were all about trial and erroring, whether it's different relationships, different friendships, jobs, places to live, right? We're figuring ourselves out. We're figuring out what works for us, what doesn't work for us. So that's the maiden. Then when we're moving into our ovulation phase, we have the mother archetype. And the mother, we're talking about this already, the mother's all about creativity. She's all about bringing life into the world. She's nurturing, she is energetic, she's lively, she's in full bloom. The maiden was all about how can the world serve me? The mother's all about how can I serve the world?
Hi, everyone. I'd like to welcome Rebecca to Elevated Conversations podcast. She's coming from Hawaii, from past. Coming from the future. Welcome, Rebecca.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
It's so good to connect with another sister. And Hawaii isn't a place that I've actually been yet, but the land has been calling, but it hasn't been like, come, Roxanne. And it's funny because this morning my son was watching surfing on YouTube and it was all Hawaii. So maybe this is another synchronicity for me getting called to Hawaii.
Totally. So the islands will call you when you're ready. Maybe they're calling you right now. Yeah, I
Maybe,
love
yeah.
that.
So whereabouts
Yeah.
are you based in Hawaii and how did you get to living there? Or have you always lived there?
No, I moved to Hawaii when I was 19 and I kind of just booked a one way to Oahu. I'm now on Maui, but I started on Oahu. It's kind of a crazy story. I was living in Portugal before that, and my parents had a retreat center over there. And that retreat center completely burnt down. One night we almost didn't get out alive, and yeah, through that, I kind of was like, you know what, like life is too short and not to do the things I want to do. And so I booked the one way to Hawaii 2 weeks after that. I literally had nothing to lose. Like literally everything was gone in the fire because I was living there at the time. And yeah, and from there I was like, I'm just gonna live my life as if, I like almost lost my life in that fire. So it
Mm.
really was just like a wake up call for me to be like, do what I want to do with my life. And so, yeah, I booked a one way to Hawaii. It was really tough at the beginning. I didn't really have any financial means. My parents also lost their business, so they weren't able to help me out as much either. Yeah, I'm just very much living that paycheck to paycheck life, but I made it work and it was probably the best decision I've ever made for myself. And it really also just taught me to like take risks and do what I want to do with my life and not hold back. But yeah, that's kind of the short story of how I got to live here, to live in Hawaii. And yeah, just it was really just this like intuitive knowing of like I just have to do it and I'll figure it out when I'm there. Because I
I've
had
got
no plan.
chills. I've got
Yeah.
chills. It's so good, like so inspiring. I love that because we've been thinking about moving to Bali for a short
Really.
period just to try
Yeah.
different flavors, to keep it
Yeah.
interesting. And I'm so happy for you that you went from such a, that would have been a part of your awakening story for sure, right? That old really letting go and moving over to the energy of Hawaii, very activating in Hawaii.
Yeah, for sure. It was yeah, it's still to this day. I'm like when I tell that story of the fire and what happened there, it's like a movie scene that we went through, It was really by the grace of God that we survived that fire.
Mm.
And also just me being so protected coming to Hawaii and like these opportunities lining up and yeah, just my journey so far. I've been here 7 years, and so it's been like the best journey ever. And every single year there's always this like little bit of an upgrade or just like something new that moves into my life. And yeah, I've just been so held by the islands, and it's just become my home after losing my home. So I'm super grateful to be here.
Good for you. I'm so happy for you. That's awesome. Following your higher self. You're following your higher self around. She's in
Yeah.
charge. So what did
Yeah.
she have installed for you when you landed in Hawaii? Because you do feminine menstrual cycle education and teaching. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But how did you get
Yeah.
into that exactly?
Yeah, so when I first moved to Hawaii, that was definitely I that was not in that field at all. I started going to massage therapy school because I thought that's what I wanted to do, and I tapped into that. Then I went to nutrition school. Then I started a network marketing business and did a bunch of sales. Did that for like 3, 4 years, and yeah, and I found a lot of success in doing that. I built a business to 6 figures, and I got completely burnt out doing that because I was so in my masculine the whole
Mm.
entire time. So I was really asked to just take a step away. Like I said goodbye to that business. I closed it down. And for a year, I was like, I'm just gonna sit in this uncertainty. I don't know what I want to do with my life and what is the right next step, but I have to take care of myself. I need to take care of my health because I was not thriving, and I was, yeah, just burnt out, and my body was showing that to me. And so in that year, yeah, I just kind of sat in this uncertainty. And while I was like really uncomfortable at times, I really needed to learn how to do that.
Mm.
Because I was such a go-getter and would just do one thing after another and work, work, work and grind, 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 hustle, hustle, hustle. And yeah, I think in that year really was taught where I was faced with what it meant to come back into my feminine in many ways. Because I really had neglected that. And so that's really when I started taking a course on womb healing. I felt so drawn to that. So I started with that. And then I really thought I wanted to become a doula. My best friend at the time was pregnant. So I was like, I think I want to become a doula. Like I want to be there for her during her birth. I took a 4-day course and I was like so lit up by it. I just realized that it wasn't like something about, I was like, it's so close to what I want to do, but it's not exactly that.
Mm.
And then I found another course on the menstrual cycle, and I started tracking my cycle and started learning more about that and implementing that in my own life. And it changed everything for me because I just started embodying this way of living and just started really coming back into my body and living with my own rhythm, my own pace versus like the trying to outrun and hustle and grind that, and just, yeah, coming back into my body. Really, that's what cycle tracking and cycle syncing to me is all about, is
Mm.
living in with that, right? And so that just changed my whole entire way of living and who I was as a woman, really, too. And so I started an Instagram page just to start sharing my story. And that kind of just started gaining so much traction and so much resonance, and women being like, this is life changing. Your work is incredible. And I was like, okay, well, I think I got to like make this my thing. And here we are. So it really was just this organic thing of me. I always say, I feel like this work found me versus me trying to find it. And it really did. And it keeps choosing me over and over again. And I just feel like I'm at a point where I can never say no to it because it's my greatest accountability partner in that sense too, but it feels like this like spiritual thing where it just like was brought into my reality for me to almost like me being the messenger of this work. That's what it feels like.
Yeah,
Um,
awesome.
yeah, really special.
Beautiful. And it's like this path, it's always like you find your greatest gifts and abilities under the shadows. And so once you did shift that and went into your, womb and started to heal, the rewards started to show, right? And you just got
Yeah,
led naturally with ease and flow over to this
yeah,
womb healing phase. And you probably thought, "Ugh, this kind of stuff, I don't think I'm going to be doing this. How could I, like, this is a bit, that was my ego with the galactic. I was thinking, oh,
yes.
this is a bit woo woo, like, come on, guys. And then next thing it's like working and you enjoy it and people take to it. And it's like, oh, okay.
Totally.
So you've just
Yeah.
got to trust, don't you, when things are, when you're being led to, then the doors are opening. That's one thing that people, they're closing their doors because they're not open to receiving.
Yeah.
And so once we learn to receive, which is in the feminine, we then start to get back on track and to really understand our purpose, our mission, and what will fulfill us. And
Mm.
it certainly seems like you've found that track as well. So with the feminine, the womb healing, let's go through the menstrual cycle and what women, can feel through this process. Because just speaking from experience myself in the masculine, hustling, exact mirror of what you just shared your story, and a lot of women listening to this would have the same story, right? We've all been built in masculine worlds and we're
Yeah.
finding that feminine, that sweetness. I wasn't having a cycle. The trauma was blocking that cycle, ovulation and a period. It might go 6 months, 8 months before I'd bleed. It wasn't until I had children that it was like a bit of a reset, but still
Yeah.
wasn't, really a beautiful cycle and awareness around that. It was more 5 years ago when we started doing the inner healing work that, okay, I'm purging with the full moon. I'm ovulating on the new moon, and these cycles that are rhythm, and it's guaranteed. So I don't track on the phone anymore. It's almost like the nature is telling me as a reflection of that. So what can you
Yeah.
share around the cycles and anything that you can help educate our listeners around that?
Yeah, wow, I love that you found healing and balance in coming into yourself, your inner work and all of that, which is it's I think so many women are all about, okay, if I have an imbalanced cycle, what are the like all the external things is almost like what we gravitate towards doing first, when like really our cycle is just such a mirror of our inner world, and it's really the barometer of our well-being, of our health, right? And so anything that is coming up internally, or a trauma or whatever it is, it will show up in our cycle. So I love that you saw that actual shift for yourself.
Mm.
um but yeah, as far as like cyclical living and really syncing with your cycle. So to give you an overview of what the menstrual cycle even is, we as women have a monthly hormone cycle. So on average, it'll be around 25 to 35 days, give or take, depending on the woman. And compared to give you a comparison to men's cycle, they have a 24-hour hormone cycle. So
Oh,
they're cycling every single day on the same hormones, whereas we will cycle on different hormones depending on where we're at in our monthly cycle.
is that why
So
in 24 hours Pete could be happy, sad, excited, miserable, all
pretty
of the
much,
four quarters?
yeah, because this testosterone will peak in the morning and then it will have a little dip. And yeah, it's like it's just that's what's happening every single day for him. Exactly. And for us, it happens over a whole month. So
Wow.
yeah,
Powerful.
with that, we really need to tend to ourselves in a different way. And our world is very much built for the masculine hormone clock. We go to 9 to 5. That's very, I mean, the average person, if they go to 9 to 5, that's very much built for the average um,
Male.
man's hormone cycle, right? So, yeah, everything in our world, just the way that it's been very just neglectful of the feminine as a whole, and that's a whole other topic in itself. But um, when we look at our monthly cycle, so within that we have 4 phases, and each phase has different qualities, different hormones, obviously, that are present. And with these different phases, we can start syncing ourselves and our lifestyle. So we start with the follicular phase. The follicular phase is also known as our inner spring, and this is really once we stop bleeding, we're coming into our follicular phase. And that's really when our estrogen is starting to rise again. And so what's happening in our bodies is our body is preparing our uterine lining, as well as the follicle within an egg, to then release for ovulation. And yeah, and really with everything that's happening in our body hormonally, the qualities that we can experience as a woman is we're more outward, we're more confident, we want to be more social, our libido is also higher. And really everything that's going on in our bodies is to potentially create and conceive a baby, right? That's what, from a survival of the fittest standpoint, is really what's happening. But all these qualities arise every single month for us, and so we're not doing that. We can utilize these qualities in different ways, whether it's through our work, within our relationships, our creativity, our productivity, all of that. So that's our follicular phase. And then we move into ovulation. And ovulation is when we release that egg. And ovulation is all about creativity. So like, I was just sharing this earlier, a little bit touching on that earlier, but when we release an egg, and we're not actually in the season of wanting to conceive that egg and have babies, it's really vital for us to harness that creative energy during ovulation and tap into what we can bring forth in our lives, because that conception energy is so present within our system and our body. And so ovulation is really has those qualities about it. It's also our inner summer. It's when everything is the most fruitful almost. And
Mm.
we can bring that to life into our lives. We can really manifest and create in our lives during ovulation because we are more tapped into that creative life force energy. And then after ovulation, we're moving into our luteal phase, also known as our inner autumn. And our inner autumn is like anything that doesn't work out in our lives, or we need to take inventory off, will show up in our luteal phase.
Mhm.
And I think most women have the hardest time in their luteal phase. What's happening here also hormonally is our progesterone is rising, our estrogen is dropping, and progesterone is really the hormone that asks you to slow down. It's a tranquilizer. And if we go against that, if we keep moving like we are in our follicular phase or ovulation phase, we will feel more PMS symptoms. It will be more difficult for us to be in our luteal phase. So it's really vital for us to slow down here. And it's also known as the pregnancy hormone because our body is seeing, okay, is it time for us to really prepare for pregnancy? Is that egg being conceived? Or are those hormones going to drop again to initiate another bleed? So if you think about that, then that's those qualities that come about with that is we need to be more internal. We need to more be slow down more. We need to nurture ourselves more. We actually need more calories during this time too. This is why we are hungry during this time. So the luteal phase is really all about this inventory time of our cycle where we can take note of what is working, what isn't. We're more in tune with our internal emotional world. So it's a really amazing time to connect with our shadow self or shadow world. And if we don't do this, this is when PMS can come up because we're suppressing these aspects or qualities of ourself. Um, and then we move into our menstrual phase. That is when we are bleeding. And I think this is the phase that most women are most familiar with because it's when we're actually noticing physical symptoms and we're bleeding, right? And
I think it's a
um,
relief when you get to this point. You're like,
yeah,
oh, thank God I'm bleeding. I'm not going to be a
yes,
psycho anymore.
totally. And that's what it really is. The bleed is a big release.
Yeah.
The luteal phase can be such a void and there's so much tension. And that's really a task of the luteal void is to
Mm,
hold the tension and stay present with what's
mm,
coming up so that with your bleed, you can then allow yourself to release and let go of that. And your blood is such it's really a spiritual process of what happens there because your blood holds emotions. And so you can really, if you tune in, you allow your body um, to really, yeah, just release these traumas and these emotions that have been stagnant in your body. This is when you work with your body, and this is also when you start bringing more awareness into your cycle and regulating your cycle if you
mm.
experience irregular cycles or painful cycles. The pain is because there's something that's stagnant and sitting in your womb, and so it needs to be released. And so that's, yeah, the menstrual phase is also our inner winter. And inner winter is all about coming inward, being with yourself, saying no to the world and yes to yourself, and questing with yourself. You're actually more tuned to deeper brainwave states during this time too. So you can, if you really tap in and tune in and get rid of the distractions, get off social media, don't not talking to anyone. And obviously, I know that not everyone has the full privilege to do all of that and just red tent themselves during this time. But as much as possible, just like give yourself permission to do the things that you need to do to take care of yourself during this time. And that in itself will already help balance and regulate your cycles when you're giving yourself that kind of permission.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, that's an overview of the cycle. There's obviously some more things that we could dive into, but
I
it's a quick
definitely
overview.
have questions. So,
Yeah.
firstly, the second phase when we're brewing our eggs and we're getting ready for that beautiful creation. I know that women do suffer from pain at this time. So
Mm.
is there something that we need to look at internally when there is pain, like pain in the back? Some women have more pain at ovulation than they do when they're purging when they have their period in the third phase and fourth
Yeah.
phase. So
Yeah.
what have you learned about that?
Yeah, so ovulation, yeah, the ovulation pain often it's what we're referring to as middle schmerz, which is ovulation pain, and that's when the ovaries kind of cramp.
Mm,
And you're saying back pain is a thing too. Really, what's going on here mainly is that there's probably an excess amount of estrogen or your estrogen not rising at a certain point. And with that's making ovulation more difficult. I love to view it from like a emotional standpoint first and
mm,
foremost versus like looking at like obviously seeing what the hormones are doing super important, but I've worked a lot with women that have had ovulation depression too, which can often correlate with these symptoms because yeah, a lot of like what we see online is like, oh my God, I'm ovulating. I should be feeling my best. I should be like
yeah.
looking my best. And then there's women that are feeling the opposite and they're feeling what they're kind of expecting to feel during their luteal during ovulation. And it's kind of like an opposite thing for them. And there's a few things that I've like emotionally correlated to that and seen in women that I've worked with. So one being that there is a suppression of their creative expression or their sexual expression.
Mm,
There's some sort of trauma that lies there. Because again, ovulation brings out these qualities in us. And if we're not familiar with that, or if we're yeah, we were told that wasn't safe to express and share, then this is what can then manifest as ovulation depression or pain during ovulation. Another one being there being a certain aspect of grieving for a lot of single women too, and for myself too, I struggle with this. During ovulation, I'm feeling all of this energy and I want to share it with someone, but I'm single and I can't.
mm,
Um, so there's this depression and grieving that you like haven't found that person to share it with,
mm,
or even that you're grieving not being a mother yet and you're wanting to share that and bring that to forth or to yeah into creation. And that's what I've seen with a lot of women too. It's like that depression, the grief that like you can't share this energy with anyone.
mm,
Um, and then another correlation I found is that you often feel like showing yourself to the world has never felt safe and kind of goes similar to the first thing that I was saying of like suppression of creativity
like
and like
letting
this.
go, right? Letting go is
Yeah.
the like egg
And
releasing, letting go.
yeah, and like and just allowing yourself to fully being your authentic expression and yeah, and not be scared to be seen, like really feeling like you have a place in this world. And if you have a limiting belief around that where you feel like I'm not allowed to be in this world, I don't have a place, I am not worthy of showing myself in these ways,
Mm,
then you're suppressing that too, and that can then show up in ovulation too. So yeah, it's really interesting how these different emotional correlations can
mm.
come through in our cycle.
And isn't it beautiful? We've got the gift of the cycle to reflect, but it's the education that a lot of people don't have because they
Mhm.
might be on, pill, contraception pill or other things to shut that and numb that down. And I certainly was on contraception because I had to get a cycle, so that helped me even get the engine
Right.
going. And it's very easy to have a pill because it allows you to move your cycle when you need it to for events. I mean, this is all of what I did back in the day, and I'm sure plenty of women do. But
So
I
many.
love the natural cycle now because it's showing me so much about myself and where the
Yeah.
imperfections are. And when we get educated on this, and like even Pete the other day, he was like, oh my God, it's like 1 week you're this, 1 week you're that. It's kind of like almost like, God, it's a bloody full on show, isn't it? I'm like, yeah, it is a show. Like women are like got all these different things going on. No wonder why we're
Yeah.
a little bit, up and down. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, so I love the reflection into the ovaries, the pain and that ovulation and just going deeper into asking the body, hey, what's wrong? And feeling that higher self call and telling you how you feel. And even though it's meant to be a spring kind of time, really,
Mhm.
if it's not, like looking how it can become a springtime and seeing what there is to clear energetically in order to move into that spring beautiful
Well,
time.
yeah. Yeah. And noting that no cycle is the same. So the way that your cycle showed up last time around might be different this time around. And I think that's, I call it the big red rule, because every cycle is going to be different. Your cycle is also going to look completely different to another woman's cycle. And
Mm,
so it's really important to not compare. They all have their own journey, their own medicine to share with you.
mm,
And when you start tuning in, that's when the magic really happens, because it really is this like this journey that you're taking through with your body every single month. And then you can explore what is coming up, why is this coming up, where's this coming
mm,
from, all the things.
mm. So let's go into the third and fourth phase of this cycle, because a lot of women they get a little bit crazy at this time, and then they're short-tempered and frustrated, and maybe they might raise their voice to their kids if they've got a family or a husband or friends and get
Yep.
irritated. And so, like also again reflecting in that period of time, and like when we get our actual period, we're like, oh, finally, I can be back to normal again. So I guess
Yeah.
understanding that this is really, half the planet is having a cycle, and it's okay to talk about, and it's okay to feel crazy because we're all feeling it. But
Mhm.
there's a phase there that you're talking about, being very powerful. So let's go into that phase. Is it just before we're about to bleed? Is it that little portal that opens? And how can we use this energy for our greatest good?
Yeah, I loved to talking about this. So yeah, this is the luteal phase, and I feel like the luteal phase, this is right after ovulation, right before a bleed. It's about depends on the woman, but 10 to 15 days, give or take. And really with the luteal phase, you almost have two parts of it. And the second part, which is like the few days, maybe the week before your bleed, is when it can get the
Yes.
most intense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, because your hormones are starting to drop a little bit and you're just feeling all the things. So really what's happening, the closer that we get to our bleed, I always say it's like the veil is thinning. So we're everything that we have suppressed will come to the surface and it's there for you to look at. I mean, if you don't, this is when our PMS comes up, we get more moody, we might have mood swings, we might have bloating, headaches, whatever your PMS symptoms may be. Um, and that can also cause us to then have a more difficult bleed because we're not looking at what's coming up. But there is so much magic and so much medicine in this phase if we tune in. It's really one of the most powerful phases I mean, they're all powerful in their own ways, but because it's such a time in our cycle for us to get so brutally honest with ourselves,
Mm.
see what is working, what's not working. It is a time for us to dive into the shadow world within our inner realm, and any trauma, any grief, any sadness, any anger. Anger is a big one for women here, where, when we're like passive aggressive and we're annoyed with everything, it's because there's unprocessed anger within us. And if we look at our society, we've always been told that anger is not safe and not okay to express as a woman. And so the wild woman within us, which is an archetype that plays a role during this time, the wild woman is needing to express herself. And so it's so important to get a little primal. It's so important to express our anger during this time. It's such a sacred way of expressing your fullest truth in that sense. And so when we learn to do that, we learn to find safety in doing that too. That's when the space can get more balanced, more easeful. And even if it doesn't get easeful, you just find ways to cope with it better because you understand, okay, this is just me needing to fully express myself, get brutally honest, scream if I need to scream, punch a pillow if I need to punch a pillow. Like everything is welcome in this phase in that sense, and not suppressing ourselves, our
And not
urges.
taking it out on your husband.
Exactly. And not taking it out on your husband. And when you learn to,
If you're
yeah,
listening, Pete, I'm sorry.
well, and then that too, there can be medicine in doing that and seeing, why do I feel triggered by my husband or my
Yeah.
partner or my friends? What is it in that I'm triggered? Why do I like what's bringing that up in me? And that in itself is inventory to see, okay, what's working, what isn't working in my marriage and my partnership. So there's medicine in doing that too.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it is such a beautiful part of our cycle. And I think there's just such a huge misunderstanding about the luteal phase. And I also often say that the qualities that we experience in that part of the cycle where it's more the dark feminine qualities of being wild and primal and being in touch with our shadow world and being able to transmute pain into power and all
Mm.
these qualities that as a society we were always taught to neglect and shut down, and all the light feminine qualities of the playfulness, the sensuality, the innocence, the sexuality, like all of those qualities are so praised and valued in a woman, but all the other ones are told not okay,
Mm.
hide those. I think that's why so many women struggle within their luteal phase, because they've never created a relationship to those different qualities within themselves.
Yeah.
That's why the follicular and ovulation phase are often easier for them, because that's again praised by our society.
And it's
Um,
masculine energy too. Like so for me, I'm like, whoa, I need to be a little bit more gentler here and delicate. And then, okay, I'm in my masculine again, you know? And so we're trying to get out of the masculine. So when we're a bit of a wild woman, it's like, oh my God, I'm here again, you know? So it's a test just to surrender. It's okay to have
or
both qualities, you know?
yeah, yeah, no structure, just allowing whatever needs to be free, be free. Yeah, exactly.
So let's
Yeah, so
dive into the four archetypes. You started to mention one about the wild woman, and I love that one. Is that the label?
She is actually a sub-archetype of the sorceress, which is the actual archetype of the phase.
Okay.
But the sorceress is the archetype that holds the luteal phase.
Okay. So let's
Yeah.
go through. So there's four different ones, is there? Okay.
Yes, exactly. So within our cycle, we have four different archetypes, each phase connected to the different archetypes of the cycle. And so our first archetype in our follicular phase is the maiden. And also, I want to preference this with all these archetypes that we're moving through within like our monthly cycle, we will move through in our larger life cycle too. So the maiden is what we start off with when we have our first bleed. We come into our maiden years, which is very like late childhood. So let's say around 14, 15, right? Then moving into our late 20s is really when we're in our maiden years. And the maiden is all about the playfulness, the curiosity, the risking it, the courageousness, the allowing herself to trial and error things, to try different things on, seeing what works for her, what doesn't work for her. And then all these qualities that the maiden comes up in the follicular phase of our cycle too, which is yeah, again, it's also the beginning of a cycle. It's all curiosity, playfulness to life, the inner spring, right? Planting seeds, very maiden quality. We move through that trial and error period in our early 20s. I don't know about you, but my early 20s were all about trial and erroring, whether it's different relationships, different friendships, jobs, places to live, right? We're figuring ourselves out. We're figuring out what works for what doesn't work for us. So that's the maiden. Then when we're moving into our ovulation phase, we have the mother archetype. And the mother, we're talking about this already, the mother's all about creativity. She's all about bringing life into the world. She's nurturing, she is energetic, she's lively, she's um, yeah, in full bloom. That's very much also the mother energy. And when we're looking at this from the larger life cycle perspective, the mother, we're really moving into our mother years at our end of our 20s. And even if we don't have children, we might start embodying those mother qualities
Mm,
slowly. Just wanting to, yeah, just also knowing who we are and how we want to serve the world. That's really
mm,
like the mother, right? The maiden was all about how can the world serve me? The
mm,
mother's all about how can I serve the world? What are
mm.
the gifts that I have to share with the world? Um, and those are the qualities that also will come forth within our ovulation phase.
So that's
And then
like
when
30 to 40 years of age, generally
yeah.
speaking. Yeah.
So right up to like perimenopause is when we're
So
experiencing mother
like
years.
30 to 50, really. That'd be
Yeah, I'd say it can even be up to 50
okay.
exactly. And you might have like you might feel the mother come, like it really depends on the
Yeah,
woman and their evolution with all of
roughly.
it. But yeah,
Yeah,
roughly,
because I'm
exactly.
feeling like I'm 38, so I'm really in my mother's phase right now. I got that new energy coming in the last couple of years. Really
Yeah.
enjoying making the school lunches and like
Yeah.
actually being a mother, not walking around going, "What have I done?"
Totally.
Because you
Yes.
don't have any sleep and all the rest of it. It's a beautiful, beautiful journey, but
Yeah.
you always
Yeah.
those questions. Yes. So
Right.
yeah. So
Yeah.
what comes after the mother?
Then after the mother, we have the sorceress. And so we were talking about the sorceress a little bit when we're moving into our luteal phase. We experience the sorceress. The sorceress has the qualities of the wild woman and the dark feminine, like I was sharing
Ah.
earlier. But the sorceress is all about transmuting pain into power. She is familiar with her shadow world. Um, yeah, she loves to be in that like brutally honest discernment stage.
Mm.
And she's all about, so when we're moving into our menopausal years, this is when the sorceress comes through. And she's just all about saying no to the world and yes to herself and just being so honest. And if things doesn't work for her, like she will tell you what's out of line for what's not. So the sorceress is really powerful in that. She's very powerful in just being her full authentic self. And so many women moving into their menopausal years and also within their luteal phase, like we're just saying, they have taught to not be brutally honest, to be full authentic, but still maybe people please or still be the mother and full on nurture everyone and have
Mm.
that super mom complex. And so there's this like
Yeah.
suppression of to their sorceress years, right? There's like the
This is
suppression
so
of
interesting because I'm just thinking about people that I know and seeing what phase they're in, and like they're
yeah,
fully that, they're fully this. Like even my mother, she's just moving into her mid 60s, and she's very much like sets the boundaries, does what she wants to do, exactly the sorcerer that you're saying. It's so
yeah,
beautiful to understand. Yeah.
totally. And once you see the correlation with all of it, you're like, wow, okay, and every woman has this evolution they go through. It's like these rite of passages they go to. And so many women also get stuck in their maiden years. This is a big thing
Mhm.
in our society where we have the beauty industry just always holding on to youth, right? Not wanting to age.
Yeah.
Menopause is often also neglected, and there's very little knowledge or information on how to support yourself as a woman for menopause. Often there's this belief of like, if I'm coming into my menopausal year, I'm not valued anymore by society because I'm old and I'm losing my fertile years, all of these things, right?
Mm.
And menopause is actually the time in a
Mm.
woman's life where they're finding their power. It's when we're saying goodbye to being held by our own cycle and coming into our own power and like being able to be in that container that we hold for ourselves versus the cycle being that container for us. And so it's actually one of the most powerful times in a woman's life, and that has so been suppressed, or there's just a whole other notion and belief system around what menopause is.
And I've
Um,
heard just Rebecca, I've heard with this power and the menopause, it's actually very, very powerful, more powerful
yeah,
than any of the other phases. But like the society and the matrix have turned it upside down. So it's like to women a weakness, right? And
yes,
are like, oh, I'm done and dusted, kind of thing.
exactly.
And so, but this is actually a false illusion. And this is
Yeah,
very good that we're diving into this because I've heard this, I've recognized this because we turn into an energetic portal. Although we're not having our cycle anymore, there's an energetic portal within our womb space that's even more potent than the portal itself in the body. Is that right?
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of, if you think about everything that I was explaining about the luteal phase right before we start our bleed, that week, that's menopause, but times 1,000, like that's what it's all about. It's the whole being in this void and learning to hold your power in that void. And
So
yeah,
mother phase is really just a warm up for the sorcerers to get you
in,
strong.
in ways, for
Training.
sure. I mean, they all are. They
Yeah.
all build
Yeah.
upon each other. And this is why if we get stuck in the maiden, we have to move through the mother probably before we moved into the sorceress. Like these qualities, the woundings that each of them have to, like they all build up on each other. It's again, it's a rite of passage that we move through with each of these archetypes, each of these stages of our lives.
Mm.
And again, if we get stuck in one, it's going to be really hard to move into the next. There's going to be a lot of resistance, and our bodies feeling that too.
And we'll
So
be a
yeah,
little bit more crazy, do you think? Is that why some people going through menopause are like getting the hot sweats and because they haven't done
totally.
any of the healing and they're not in touch with the body?
Totally. The more menopause symptoms you have, the probably the harder. And I'm not saying that like if you haven't done any of the
Yeah,
work,
of
you're not gonna have
course.
any symptoms because everything will come to the surface no matter what you have done in your life.
The
But
body's just trying to trigger a knowing and a healing process for you.
exactly, exactly. So, yeah, and again, if we correlate this back to our monthly menstrual cycle, the menopausal years, and then like the luteal phase. So those two phases in these different cycles, larger life cycle and our monthly life cycle, are connected. They both are connected to the sorceress. And so many women, I just talked about how so many women are stuck in the maiden phase of their life cycle, but that also happens within our monthly menstrual cycle where we're stuck in the maiden, the follicular phase, right? This is the phase that often we're like, we want to stay here forever. We want to feel all these qualities. And then they have a harder time moving into their luteal phase because they hold on to those qualities. So it is also correlated in the way that you show up in your menstrual cycle will also correlate to the way that it will show up in your larger life cycle. So menstrual cycle awareness and coming in tune with that is also practice for moving and transitioning into these other archetypes as you move into your life, especially menopause and birth, all of the rites of passages that women move
Mm.
through. Menstrual cycle awareness is really that practice, the daily practice of tuning in with your womb, with your body, to then yeah, prepare you for birth, menopause, all the
Mm.
bigger life cycles.
So what's it
Um,
then after the sorcerers? Did we get to the fourth one yet or not yet? No.
Not yet. So the after the sorceress, we have the crone, and the
Uh-huh.
crone is yeah, and she's the wise woman, the woman that
Uh-huh.
accepts everything as is. She is okay with death and
Mm.
understands the natural process of life. She's also very acceptance of aging and yeah, just like and I guess if we think about the menstrual phase itself, that is a death process that we move through every single month. And so that's what the crone is all about, is accepting that death process, accepting the rebirth of that too, knowing that when we die, something new has to come to life too, and being very at peace in that knowing. Um, and so in the larger life cycle, after we come out of menopause, this is probably within our mid 60s, we move into our crone years. And this is really when, yeah, we really just come into that wise elder and also being the wise elder of our community.
Mm.
Um, and that is another thing where so many women that are older, their wisdom hasn't been listened to in, I mean, that used to be the way that we would live, right, within community, and the wise elders being the ones we go to for advice and wisdom, and that kind of has been neglected too. So it's really important to bring that back and allowing the crones of our community to hold that wisdom, that red thread. The red thread is that thread that every woman is connected to. The ones that come before us, the ones that come after us, we all have this innate wisdom within us, and
Mm.
so they hold that for us.
Mm. Yeah, I can see crone in a few women that I know too. Pete's mum, my mum's moving into it too. You can see the shift in the ages. Like, that 65 mark, it's almost like clockwork, that one. It feels
Yeah,
like it's very clockwork because they realize, okay, they're getting old now. It's time to accept that and move
yeah,
into the wisdom, how I can help my children and that. And,
yeah.
with the Crohn's giving advice and wisdom, the evolution of consciousness through humanity for the overall picture are also they're growing and expanding because they're
Yeah,
listening to their elders. They're not staying in baby
totally.
phase. So they're more
Yeah,
mature as the cycles go on and on, right?
exactly. Yeah, and that in itself is part of cyclical living, is listening to the generations before you, right? And moving and honoring them if because that is part of like coming back into the cyclical life that we have neglected in many ways in our lives, you know?
Mm.
Yeah, it's so important to do that and honor that in whatever way you can.
Beautiful. So, recently you've collabed with a company. Now you have to remind me of the company's name in microdosing and using that with your cycle. So, let's hear about all of that because it's very fascinating, and a lot of women would probably benefit from some education around this topic to have an assistant, plant
Yeah,
medicine to help them through those times when they're trying to reflect into the womb.
yeah, for sure. Yeah. So the company that I partner with is called Tend the Wild. They're based in Northern California. And yeah, it was really a collaboration that came really naturally. I had brought the idea to them, not thinking that they would want to collab with me. And I was like, this is an idea I've had in the past. You guys should do this. And then they're like, do you want to do it with us? I was like, sure. And I myself have microdosed for on and off for years. It's a really big part of just my healing journey. I love microdosing. Mushrooms in itself is like one of my favorite medicines, and they've helped me so much with so many different things. And so it's like syncing it with your cycle. I mean, if we, because I eat differently depending on where my cycle, I work out differently depending where I'm at my cycle. My social life looks different. Like all my different areas in my life looks different. So why would I be taking the exact same thing every single month too when it comes to the medicine of microdosing? And so
Mm.
created two microdose blends, one for the first half of the cycle, which includes follicular and ovulation, and then one for the second half of the cycle, which includes luteal. And then for the menstrual phase, we create a cacao blend because that is my ritual. I love drinking cacao, and I also feel like because we're so open and sensitive during our bleed, I think it's really vital to I mean, I have microdosed during my bleed, but I personally don't love to do that because I feel like my bleed in itself is a microdose, you know?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might be really
So,
getting deep if you're microdosing on your bleed. That's for
totally.
sure. It'll enhance everything.
Yes, totally, 100%. So
So
I
what about the
love
phase before the bleed though? Because,
luteal.
sometimes we're
Yeah.
so confused and lost in it. And we're just like,
Yeah.
I don't even know what's wrong. And so
Yeah.
that might help with the consciousness awareness of what the issue or the trigger
Exactly.
could be.
Yeah, so my experience with it is that when I microdose throughout the whole entire month, and I start with my follicular phase, moving into luteal, my emotional regulation is so much more like I have so much more awareness around it because the microdose just helped me tap into that, and so when I can move into my luteal, there's not that much of like this like outburst that all has to come to the surface, but I've like almost regulated it throughout the whole entire month.
Okay.
And then obviously every woman's different. I also had another woman that I was talking. She was taking microdose for her cycle, and she mentioned that the first couple cycles of her doing it, it was really difficult. Like everything felt more difficult, but then it started easing
Mhm.
more. Like it was more there was more balance after a while. And I think really like what we've been talking about throughout this podcast is that everything will come to the surface, and I think that the medicine can help bring everything to the surface faster for you to look at.
Mm.
So it can be a little intense at first, potentially. It depends on who you are and the way that you regulate your emotions and your connection to your emotional world. But in all, it is such an amazing way to help balance your cycle. And the really cool thing about these microdose, we have different blends that have different herbs within those different blends to support the hormones of that cycle too, or that phase of the cycle. So yeah, they're really there to support with that phase, that inner season of the cycle, and just bring more balance, more awareness and tension into your cycle practice.
And so, just quickly, which herbs are for the ovulation phase and which herbs are blended in there, just so we can have understand that and the reason behind.
Yeah. Um, you know what? There's so many herbs. I can't even
Oh,
list them for you right
wow.
now.
Okay. They've got
And
a really
I
good
was,
blend.
yeah, it's a really great blend.
Okay.
Um, and they and I had an herbalist do that for me too.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm really knowledgeable with herbs, but I have my herbalist do it for me.
Yeah. And we can we'll link
Yeah,
the
it's
website
a
down so
whole
that people can check it out for sure.
yeah, I would definitely the website will say everything with all the different herbs.
Yeah.
There's a bunch, but it's really great. Bunch
Okay,
of great herbs.
awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations on the achievement over the last 7 years, listening to your higher self, moving to Hawaii, and then
So,
this wealth and of so much wisdom that you've brought through today. I've really enjoyed listening to your medicine and what you've learned. And thank you for sharing it with everyone here. It's been a really good conversation.
so glad. Yeah, it's been life-changing wisdom for me. So I hope that I can reach as many women as possible with it because it's really so vital.
Totally. So, so important. And so, Rebecca, where can everyone find you if they wanted to connect and see what other offerings you have?
Yeah, so you can find me on my Instagram, which is at Bloom Womb. Bloom is spelled Blume, and then womb, WOMB. And then I have my website, which is going to be bloomwomb.com. And both of those have all the links, whether if you want to do one-on-one coaching with me. I have retreats that are coming up this year too, and a bunch of different ebooks and resources and stuff like that.
Awesome. A retreat in Hawaii sounds beautiful.
For
Well
sure.
done. Well done for
Yeah.
you. And thank you for your service. Thank you for doing your own inner healing work to help the planet and all of the medicines that you're sharing and the energy. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me.